Hello everyone, this is part 26 of What If Naruto Was Abused and Leaves Konoha, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Gaara. Naruto looked over at the smirking form of the Kazekage. When he had said he would send people to pick up Gurren, Yukimaru, and Gozu, he hadn't expected him to come himself. Hello Naruto, I expect you weren't expecting me to come. Naruto just nodded dumbly while a head popped up behind Gaara. Hi Tayuya, hi Naruto. Both of them waved at Matsuri, a little dumbstruck that both had left sooner to come all the way here. Gaara saw this and smiled, waving his hands to dispel any ideas they might have been getting. No, I didn't come all the way here just to escort your friends, that would be a little overkill, don't you think? Naruto just nodded, his usual smile coming back to his face as Gaara turned to face the Raikage. I came to speak to Raikage Dono, I figured it was about time we met. Naruto was a little surprised that the two hadn't met already, but he guessed they were both busy and couldn't afford to up and leave their villages. This made him wonder what had changed. Gaara saw this as well. I decided that the Akatsuki has gotten away with too much. It's time we did something about it before something bad happens. I have already received word that nobody has seen Iwa's Jinchuriki for a few months now, either of them. Naruto put his head down solemnly. He knew that meant Akatsuki had gotten to them. That is why we have decided to convene in Konoha. Kiri will also be there if Mizukage Dono accepts the message I sent. Naruto looked at him confused. Why Konoha? He figured somewhere more neutral would be appropriate, even if all four countries were somewhat allies. Kiri had gained a reputation thanks to their past, despite everything Mei was working to change. Kumo wasn't exactly liked in Konoha after certain incidents in the past which the Raikage was also working to fix. Suna were Konoha's allies, but that wouldn't stop any petty personal grudges people had with Wind Country. In all, Naruto didn't believe it to be a very good idea. I know what you are thinking, but a neutral country wouldn't be good right now. There would be nothing stopping Akatsuki or anybody else from attacking while we are all convened. That is why we must do it in a shinobi country where we will at least be protected to a degree. He looked at Tayuya and Naruto, smiling softly at his oldest and closest friends. And that is why you will accompany me as my bodyguards for the duration of the summit. Naruto still didn't seem sure of this. But what about Iwa? They won't be happy that all the other Kage are convening. The Raikage scoffed from his chair, obviously finding the idea laughable. Ha! Like Unoki would ever try something. The legendary fence-sitter wouldn't dare. Gaara nodded solemnly. Raikage Dono is correct, even Chuchikage Dono would not risk attempting anything with all the other nations convened at once. He sighed as he looked at the Raikage. Even so, I have sent him an invitation to the summit, despite how unlikely it is for him to actually come. That way he cannot blame us for convening without Iwa having a representative. Naruto nodded with a frown. Gaara made a good case, even if he still didn't like it. But why does it concern Iwa at all? Like you said, they don't even have Jinchuriki anymore. Gaara shook his head. Despite how much Naruto had grown, he could be a bit short-sighted at times. No. The immediate situation does not concern Iwagakure, but the Akatsuki are collecting the Biju for a reason. While we don't know what that reason is, it is obviously not good. That does concern Iwagakure. As a major village, they have a right to know what we are doing to stop them. Naruto just nodded. While he had slightly less restriction thanks to their friendship, Gaara was still his Kazekage and he would have to listen to him. Fine. So when are we leaving? Gaara looked at the Raikage, who simply nodded. Tomorrow. It's best to deal with this soon before there are any more issues. Naruto nodded, at least that made sense to him. Tayuya on the other hand was frowning, counting off on her hands. Raikage-sama, who would you be bringing as escorts? I looked at her, curiously, wondering what the redhead was thinking. Yugito and B, I wouldn't have anybody else as my personal escorts, plus they are the most powerful shinobi in the village in active service. Tayuya nodded with a frown. But then with Gaara, Naruto, Fu, B, and Yugito all there, plus whoever Mei brings, wouldn't that be a lot of Jinchuriki in one place? Naruto's eyes widened, seeing what she was driving at as he turned to Gaara. Yes, that is correct. Precisely the reason why we are doing so. No matter how powerful Akatsuki believes themselves to be, they would not dare attack a hidden village when it contains 5 Jinchuriki and 4 Kage. It would simply be foolish. Naruto had to agree with Gaara on that one. The numbers alone were intimidating to say the least. Nobody would pit themselves against those odds. Naruto suddenly had a thought as he turned back to Gaara. Wait, if we're going to Konoha, then who is escorting Gurren, Yukimaru, and Gozu to Suna? Gaara just smiled as the door to the Raikage's office opened to reveal 2 figures. Hey Squirt, long time no see. Naruto turned to see the smirking faces of Kankuro and Temari. Naruto was walking through the streets of Kumo, flanked on one side by Tayuya and Fu, on the other by Kankuro and Temari. He was busy showing the pair around Kumo while the Raikage showed Gaara and Matsuri around himself. Right now Naruto seriously wished he was with them as Kankuro chatted about how he had converted Sasori's old body into a puppet called Scorpion. It all sounded far too morbid for Naruto's taste, but he politely nodded along while Temari was shooting him apologetic looks. They stopped for some lunch at one of Tayuya's preferred restaurants, mainly because they were one of the few that serves dango in Kumo. Temari constantly looked between Tayuya and Naruto with a smirk, mostly because Tayuya was sitting as close to the blonde as physically possible without sitting on his lap. She would have done, but the table was too low down and it would have been uncomfortable for both of them. Fu was also slightly cuddling up to Naruto on one side, but not quite to the extent that Tayuya was. Cool tattoo Tayuya. Temari nearly scowled at Kankuro for breaking the awkward silence she had been enjoying so much. Tayuya just rubbed her neck idly while Naruto looked at her with concern. He knew that ever since he had altered the seal, Tayuya wasn't in any discomfort, but any mention of it would make her remember how it used to be. He just smiled and wrapped a comforting arm around the redhead's shoulders, pulling her closer into him. It's a seal actually. Kankuro nodded with a smile, still shoveling the food into his mouth without abandon. What's it do? He yelped as Temari kicked him from under the table. Her brother might have been an unobservant moron, but she could clearly see the topic was a painful one for Tayuya. Naruto just smiled at them both warmly. It's okay Temari, I guess we never told you about it before. He tried to remember back to when Orochimaru had first given her his seal in the second stage of the Chunin exams. After that he guessed it must have just never come up with Temari or Kankuro. He quickly explained it to them, about what Orochimaru had done and how Kakashi had sealed it before a few days ago when Naruto improved it, getting rid of its negative properties. The 2 Suna siblings listened intently, wondering how they hadn't heard about this sooner, especially after 2 years. Whoa, I didn't know you could use seals. Everybody just looked at Kankuro incredulously while Temari slapped him over the back of the head. That's what you took away from this? Kankuro just shrugged and went back to his food while everybody else just sighed. Fu giggled a little. She found the interaction between the siblings funny, knowing it was all in good fun. Naruto recovered, finishing the last of his dango while Tayuya pouted. He usually left the rest of it for her but was hungry today after their spar. Well, I guess we should introduce you guys to the people you'll be escorting back to Suna. Temari just nodded, having finished her own meal while Kankuro tried to cram as much of his as he could into one of his pouches. Naruto led them back out, taking them over to where Gurren and the others were staying, still under observation from Kumo. For some reason he had a feeling that Gurren would get along with Temari. Tayuya walked next to Naruto, enjoying the feel of his arm wrapped around her waist. It always made her feel so secure. So, you want to do something tonight? It is our last night in Kumo. Naruto nodded idly with a smile. Yeah, that sounds like fun, but I think I should visit Kurama first. With everything that's been going on recently, we haven't had much time to talk. Tayuya just nodded with a sigh. She wasn't necessarily jealous of Kyubi, she just didn't like that Naruto would almost place them with the same importance. Okay, she wasn't fooling anybody, she was jealous as hell. Of course she wouldn't say anything as it would make her sound petty. Naruto couldn't help that a giant demon fox was sealed in his stomach. Then again, it didn't really help that Kyubi was a woman, although Naruto always assured her that Tayuya was far more attractive in his eyes. Naruto had seen some strange things in his life: Fu's wings, Hiden's talking head, a woman materializing out of paper, and a giant rapping octopus, just to name a few. However, the scene that someone would walk into in his mindscape later on that night would have ranked very high on that list. If someone else was able to enter it, they would have seen an enormous fox with 9 tails. Normally that alone would have been enough for some people to call strange or unusual. Of course Naruto never did anything in half measures, so of course the enormous nine-tailed fox was on her back, writhing in pleasure as over 100 clones of one blonde Jinchuriki were rubbing her stomach. The furry but powerful tails thrashed about as the Kyuubi received the tummy rub of a lifetime. The clones used whatever they could to scratch her. The landscape around them was slowly being leveled as the tails destroyed everything in sight, Kurama unable to control them as her mind was lost to the pleasure of the moment. A few minutes later and Naruto had dispelled all his clones while the Kyuubi had shrank back to her smaller size. She was still on her back though, panting heavily as she tried to recover from the clone massage. Naruto was just smiling at her. He knew all the tailed beasts' lives must have been hard. They were created by the sage of the six paths nearly on his deathbed, dying not too long after. They had to grow up in a world that didn't understand them, remembering only the Kyuubi and the destruction it had wrought. Naturally they were feared, hated, driven out by the fearful humans who couldn't accept the enormous chakra constructs. In a way Naruto felt connected to them, like he could understand them. They had both grown up without parents, only having a name to go on. They both were feared for something beyond their control. They both had to grow up without guidance, without truly knowing what was right or wrong and why. In the end, Naruto could connect with the Kyuubi more than most, except Gaara. You remind me of him, you know. Naruto looked around to where Kurama was watching him, still on her back with her paws raised up in such an adorable way he had difficulty believing the power she held. Who? Kurama smiled warmly, a rare occurrence with the great fox. Our father, you are a lot alike. We may not have known him very long, but we have vague memories of when we were still a part of Mother. He could find the good in anybody, helping them to bring it out, but at the same time he knew when violence was necessary, even though he loathed it. He was powerful, but humble beyond belief. He never asked for anything in return for what he did. In fact, you look a lot alike too. If you had red hair and no whiskers I would almost call you twins. Naruto wasn't sure what to make of being compared to the most legendary figure in the shinobi world. Really? Kyuubi just nodded with melancholy. It had been a better time back then for a short while. She had her siblings and her father. Then he passed away, leaving a world that despised them, feared them and drove them apart. Again it had seemed good for a while. The memories faded with the generations and they were left alone for a while. Then stories became legends and people sought out the Biju for their power, sealing them away into hosts to fight their wars. The hatred of humanity was too much for some of them, driving Shukaku insane as he was forced to watch a monk become a weapon of war. I'm not the only one. Chomei sees it as well, and I'm sure if Shukaku would leave his bloodlust for even a moment he would see it too. He practically worshipped father. Naruto sighed, thinking about everything that had been done to the Biju, everything they had to live through. Even Kyuubi wasn't spared. He thought of how she was sealed within him, stripped over half her chakra. The Biju weren't like humans, chakra was what they were, and to have it taken away must be like losing a limb. Kurama, Kyuubi looked up, rolling onto her side to better speak to Naruto. I've been thinking about what you told me, the fox quirked her head quizzically, about your yin chakra. Kyuubi sat up on her haunches before padding over to sit beside Naruto, letting the blonde rest against her body as a few tails wrapped around him. This was their standard position when they talked, a remnant from when Naruto was a child and would do this. Why doesn't it just replenish itself like normal chakra? He had been pondering this question for a while. Chakra wasn't limitless, one could use it up. However, after resting it would replenish itself. Kurama chuckled sadly, watching one of her own tails sway in front of her. Does Biju chakra not recover? Kurama seemed to be hypnotized by her own tail, a symbol of her power amongst the Biju, 9 of them, marking her as the most powerful, even with only half her chakra available. Yes it does, but without foundations a house can't be built. Naruto looked up at her curiously as Kurama continued to watch her tail. Energy cannot come into being from nothing, it must come from somewhere. That is why a human will die if they use all their chakra. If there is none there to grow from, it will not grow. Naruto nodded slowly, so there needed to be some chakra there in the first place for it to replenish itself, and without any yin chakra Kyuubi couldn't grow it back. Do you ever wonder why when you die, I will as well? Whereas when Gaara, B, Yugito or even Fu someday pass, their Biju will only be freed. Naruto nodded. He had wondered that sometimes, but always just put it up to the seal the fourth had used. In a sense it is true, I will die, but not in the way you think. Naruto looked up again, partly wondering why Kyuubi was telling him this. When the day comes and you pass into the next life, I will be freed from this prison into the world, however without my yin chakra I can never take form again. In a sense, I will be dead. Naruto blinked a few times, his eyes furrowing as he thought furiously about what Kyuubi had told him. The cogs in his head spun rapidly as his mind flickered from idea to idea. Kurama would be nothing but yang chakra, floating through the world, forever unable to affect it in any meaningful way again. It sounded like a terrible fate to Naruto, not one he wished on the fox that had become his first friend. Is there nothing we can do? Kurama just chuckled. Oh yes, she saw so much of her father in the boy, so willing to help and hating feeling helpless. I have accepted my fate, Naruto. To recover my yin chakra from the Shinigami would be impossible. Nothing returns from his stomach. Naruto frowned again. His mind was working harder than it ever had before. Slowly a smile found its way onto his face, even as a crazy, stupid and brilliant plan began to form. Kurama. The Kyuubi finally broke her gaze away from her tail to stare down at Naruto, red eyes meeting blue. The seal draws out your chakra right, converting it from a form harmful to me into my own so that I can use it. Kyuubi nodded, her eyes narrowing as she began to suspect what Naruto was proposing. What if I just reversed it? Converting my yin chakra into a form that you could use, letting you redevelop it on your own. Kurama blinked at the suggestion, unable to truly believe what the young man was telling her. But that would mean putting yourself in a situation where I could drain out your chakra, you would be at my mercy. With a physical form I could have a body again, I would no longer fear our deaths being intertwined, in fact your death would be to my benefit, I could be free again. Naruto listened to her, his warm smile never wavering for a moment. When she stopped he simply looked up at her, making sure their eyes were looking directly at one another. I trust you. For a moment Kyuubi could almost see her father's face superimposed across Naruto's before she realized what it was. Their smiles were the same, so full of compassion and caring that one couldn't help but be drawn in by it. Kyuubi sighed as she was brought back to memories of her father with that same exact smile. Even if you wanted to, Kit, you don't have the key to your seal, without it you couldn't alter it. Naruto frowned, she was right, he didn't have the key to his seal and there was no way he had the time to pick it apart bit by bit, it would take years. He thought about who might have it. Konoha would only entrust it to somebody powerful who could protect it, someone with sealing skills. The first person that came to mind was the fourth himself, but he was dead, so the next logical choice was Jiraiya of the Sannin. He was powerful, that much was obvious. From what he knew he traveled a lot, which would keep the key safe, and he was a sealing master, which made him perfect. The only problem was tracking him down. Hopefully when they were in Konoha he could ask Tsunade about it, until then there was little he could do about it. Naruto couldn't help but look across at Gaara as they walked together. Ever since they entered the land of fire he had been reclusive. Matsuri had actually been worried enough to ask Naruto if he knew what was wrong with the sand wielder. Naruto had no idea, and that worried him. Before leaving for his training trip Naruto could almost always tell what was going through Gaara's mind. Now, as they walked along the path that brought them closer to Konohagakure, he couldn't find what was wrong with his friend. Hey Gaara. The redhead didn't even look around when Naruto slunk back in the group to walk next to him. Yo, for your thoughts. Gaara looked up at the path ahead of them before sighing and looking around at his friend. A lot has changed since the Chunin exams, hasn't it? Naruto looked at his friend quizzically before nodding as he contemplated his words. I guess it has. Orochimaru, Akatsuki, hell, even me and Tayuya and you and Matsuri. Gaara just nodded as they continued along the road. It was just the five of them, the Raikage would be coming his own way. Yes, who would have thought that when I next walked through the gates of Konoha it would be as Kazekage of the Sand Village. Naruto nodded again, thinking of all the things that had changed for better, or for worse, since that eventful month. Not just that, we have both changed, both become more powerful. Naruto smirked at that as he turned back towards the redhead. Yeah, but isn't that good? We have to get stronger so we can continue to protect the people closest to us. Gaara nodded solemnly, still caught up in his nostalgia. As a Kage of a hidden village he knew that better than anybody. Yes, but don't you wish we could go back to those days when it was just me, you and Tayuya? No worries except for our next mission or next prank. Naruto smiled warmly as he placed a hand on Gaara's shoulder. Not a day goes by when I don't think that Gaara. His friend turned to look at him, a little surprised, but every day I remind myself not only of what hardships I've had to face, but of what I've gained. I have Tayuya, I have Fu, I grow stronger so I can protect them, and I have the wisdom you can only earn by making mistakes. I wouldn't trade away my life for any other, just like I hope you wouldn't either. Gaara paused for a moment as he thought before he looked up at Matsuri, and an equally genuine smile appeared on his features. I know what you mean. Naruto's smile turned into a cheeky grin as he playfully slapped his friend on the back. Then stop being such a grump and go talk to your fiancé. Gaara shot him an annoyed look before it shifted into a tired smile. They parted as he walked forward so he could travel alongside Matsuri, and Naruto joined Fu and Tayuya, walking in between two of his most precious people. So what's eating Gaara? Naruto smiled as he hooked an arm around Tayuya's shoulders, letting her lean on him as they walked. He was just caught up in the past, back when it was the three of us. I think that it's all moving a little too fast for him, realizing that we are all slowly moving apart. Tayuya looked at him strangely. What do you mean? Naruto sighed as his glance drifted on to Fu. Ever since the Chunin exams, we've had more and more responsibilities thrown on our shoulders, and ultimately it's driven us in different directions. Think about it. Back then we were inseparable, we did everything together. Nowadays we only really see Gaara when we're in the Sand Village, and until Akatsuki are dealt with, those visits are few and far between. Tayuya huffed, pulling herself closer to Naruto as if it could happen to them as well. Well, joy to you, Mr. Fucking Buzzkill. Naruto chuckled and returned her gesture, pulling her even closer to him so it looked like they were joined at the hip. It's true, we'll always be friends, though it's just there's more in our lives now. Gaara has Matsuri though, I have Fu, and we have each other. Tayuya nodded, smiling as she looked down the road they were traveling. Traveling like a civilian was boring the hell out of her, but it was moments like these, when she was pressed up against Naruto, that made it livable. Huh, I guess. Naruto broke away from her, looking down at her with his eyebrow quirked. I guess. Tayuya just shrugged. What? Naruto just shook his head in amusement. Well, maybe I'll just go to someone who appreciates me. With that he bent down low and pulled Fu onto his back suddenly, shocking the mint-haired teen, before he raced off down the path. Hey, get back here, shithead, that's my piggyback. All she could hear was Fu and Naruto's laughter as the three of them raced down the path. Gaara had his head firmly planted in his hand while Matsuri was smiling in bemusement. Now he could remember why he preferred now instead of their childhood, at least he could get some peace nowadays. Naruto walked through the streets of Konoha with the hood of his coat up, obscuring his hair and a lot of his face with its shadow. Thankfully that seemed to stop people from staring at him this time, and it made him wonder why he hadn't thought of this in the first place. He and Tayuya were walking on either side of Gaara and Matsuri as they were escorted through the village by a squad of Anbu operatives, only the best for the Kazekage. With this kind of escort it didn't take them long to reach the Hokage's office, where Tsunade was sitting behind her desk, unsurprisingly free of her Hokage robes. It was just as well, considering Gaara had decided to come without his robes, just like he knew the Raikage wouldn't either. Instead he wore a large red coat that was fastened at the front and covered by beige body armor slung over one shoulder. His gourd, though, was notably missing, drawing the eye of the Hokage, who chose to say nothing. Kazekage Dono, it is good to see you. Gaara nodded politely. As it is good to see you also, Hokage Dono. Tsunade smiled at the redhead's overly polite greeting, waving him off with a hand. There's no need for the extra pleasantries, Gaara, we should all be friends here. Gaara just smiled pleasantly, sitting in the chair presented to him. So I understand that you were the one to call this council of Kage. Gaara nodded. As I have discussed with Raikage Dono, it is clear Akatsuki has been given too much free rein. Something should be done before their plans begin to threaten our nations. Tsunade sat back in the chair, nodding as she glanced out at the village, her village. I believe you're right, but what would you have us do? Akatsuki and their leader prove elusive, and we have little information on their members or practices. Gaara smiled secretively and looked towards Naruto, who nodded and stepped forward. While the details should be discussed when the other Kage get here tomorrow, I can assure you that Akatsuki have been dealt a crippling blow. Already 4 members have been dealt with. Tsunade raised her brow, leaning down onto the desk with her head propped up on her steepled fingers. And how do you know this? Gaara smiled. 2 of them I have dealt with personally with Naruto's aid, a third by Naruto alone and a fourth by Tayuya and the Jinchuriki of the Nibi. Tsunade raised an eyebrow, wondering how she hadn't heard of this yet, especially considering Jiraiya was supposed to be up to date on these matters. She also cast a very curious glance at Naruto, wondering how the boy in front of her could become powerful enough to take on an Akatsuki member alone. On a cue from Gaara, Naruto emptied out the pouch on his belt containing the Akatsuki rings he had collected, each one clattering down onto the desk as Tsunade looked at him, surprised. Wow, you really did it. Gaara just nodded as Naruto returned the rings to his pouch, sealing them away with his own smirk. As for information, he motioned to Tayuya, who walked forward and dropped a large file on Tsunade's desk. The young-looking blonde just groaned at the sight of more paperwork as she casually flicked through the pages inside. That file contains a complete list of the Akatsuki members, their known abilities and last known locations, although they do tend to travel quite a bit. Tsunade nodded absently as she reached the page with Sasori's dossier, noting the large black X through his photo. She found the same thing on Deodara, Kakazu, and Hiden's page before she came across the last page. You have no information on their leader. Gaara shook his head while Tayuya frowned. She had done a lot to try and find out about him, to no avail. No, he proves to be difficult to pin down. All we have is a name, Pian. Tsunade quirked an eyebrow again, noticing the absence of a photo or really any information about the man, his abilities or his appearance. How did you come across this information? Gaara smiled again as he leant back in his chair. I took active measures in assuring we had operatives within Akatsuki's fold. Tsunade scowled. Jiraiya had assured her it was near impossible to infiltrate the group. She would be having words with the Toad Sage later on. Well, Kazekage Dono, this information will prove invaluable, I'm sure. Tsunade paused as she flicked past a page, moving her hand back as she examined dossier of the member marked as Conan. It contained no photo, but it marked her abilities down as paper manipulation, which sounded awfully familiar for some reason. Naruto tried to look over Gaara's shoulder. Tayuya had given him descriptions of all the members before, but he had never seen the actual file before. Tsunade quickly pulled it to one side of the desk, figuring she could mull it over later. Well, would you care for a tour of the village Kazekage Dono? Gaara shook his head kindly. No, I've been before, and if I forget anything I'm sure Naruto can help me find it. Tsunade frowned again, less noticeably this time as she once again took to examining the blonde in front of her. She feared that her sensei had made such a mistake allowing him to leave the village. He had grown into a fine man, and a finer shinobi. To take on an S-ranked criminal at the age of 16 and not only survive but win, it was nearly unheard of. Maybe part of that strength was because he had been allowed to leave, but Tsunade couldn't help but wish that the same results would exist if he had stayed. Yes, very well. Everybody took that as a dismissal, and Gaara politely stood before inclining his head in Tsunade's direction, to which she replied in kind. If I may, would Naruto stay for a few moments to talk? Gaara looked at Naruto, who just shrugged back while the redhead turned. I don't see a problem with that as long as I get him back in one piece. Tsunade smiled at the joke as everybody moved out of the room, just leaving Tsunade and Naruto alone as the younger blonde took the seat in front of the Hokage's desk. So what's up, Tsunade? The older blonde growled at the disrespectful way he talked, but inside it reminded her of the little brat who had convinced her to take the position in the first place. I thought since you left the village so quickly last time you were here we could catch up. Naruto nodded with a smile. Okay, so what do you want to talk about? He had the urge to kick up his feet on her desk but thought that might be pushing it, even for him. How about how you managed to take down an S-ranked criminal by yourself and fought against two other killed? Tsunade blinked as Naruto interrupted her. What? Naruto smirked cheekily. I was the one who killed Sasori and Deodara in the end. Tsunade just blinked again as the few Anbu in the room all looked at the cocky blonde incredulously, none of them actually believing what he was saying. Although admittedly I probably wouldn't have been able to do it without Gaara there. Tsunade sighed slightly at that, although that still made it 2 16-year-olds taking down older, more experienced and in all cases more powerful opponents, ignoring the fact that one was the Kazekage. And just how did you manage that? Naruto just smiled as he stared up at the roof, pulling out one of his special kunai and twirling it around his finger by the hole. All the Anbu in the room stared at it in utter disbelief, not believing for even 1 second that the kid, who they were starting to notice looked incredibly similar to the fourth, had mastered the Hiraishin. You know me, I have my ways. Tsunade smiled warmly, just accepting the fact that out of everybody she knew, she would never truly understand Naruto. Yeah, I guess you do. Now what's the deal between you and Tayuya? Last time you were here she seemed awfully close to you. Naruto smiled fondly as he thought about the redhead that had become so integral to his life. You guys done it yet? Naruto shot forward in his chair, the kunai spinning out of his hand as he stared at Tsunade incredulously while the blonde Hokage just fell back in her chair, laughing furiously. Tsunade. She continued to chuckle as she wiped a tear away, before leaning back over and smiling at Naruto warmly. But seriously, I'm glad for you too. Naruto was still a little shaken but he just nodded with a weak smile. There is actually something I wanted to talk to you about, 2 things actually. Tsunade waited for him to continue politely as he rooted around in a pouch before drawing out the scroll he used to make all his notes about Fuinjutsu. He opened it up and found the notation he was looking for before presenting it to Tsunade. Have you ever seen this seal before? Tsunade looked at it with a scrutinizing eye. To her it just looked like a few rectangles lined up with the bottom 2 split in half like a snake's tongue. Sorry Naruto, if you want help with seals you should ask Jiraiya. Naruto waved his hand, pointing to the seal again. No, I already know what it does, I just want to know where it came from. I found this on the tongue of a man who attacked me, Tayuya and Fu when we last left your village. Tsunade suddenly felt a pang in her heart as she heard Naruto refer to the leaf as her village for some reason. He was dressed like a leaf Anbu but the mask was wrong, like it was demonized. Tsunade frowned. Naruto was giving her the description of a root operative, but that organization had been disbanded after the last shinobi war. Sorry Naruto, I can't help you with that. Naruto frowned before sighing and putting the scroll back into his pouch. He would look it up again later. Okay, well speaking of Jiraiya, do you know where he is? I need to talk to him about something. Tsunade settled back in her chair, putting the root issue to the back of her mind for now. Why? What do you need him for? Naruto just motioned to the general area of his stomach. It's about the seal. Tsunade's eyebrows shot up in alarm as she slammed her hands down on the desk in panic. What is it? Is the seal weakening? Naruto quickly waved his hands out in front of him to calm the frightened Hokage down. No, nothing like that I swear. Tsunade sat back down shakily before gulping and releasing the breath she had been holding. Kami brat, don't scare me like that. So what do you need him for anyway? Naruto chuckled at seeing Tsunade freak out like that. It wasn't every day he could scare a Kage, well, nearly. Oh, I just need to talk to him about a few things, nothing too important. For some reason Naruto didn't think that telling Tsunade he planned to double the Kyuubi's power and give her a physical form again was a good idea. Tsunade didn't seem convinced but leaned back in the chair anyway, still a little shocked from jumping to a conclusion. Well, he isn't in the village at the moment but he will probably be back for the Kage Summit. I've sent for him to act as one of my bodyguards during the meeting. Naruto nodded. Although why Tsunade needed bodyguards in her own village when Anbu was swarming everywhere was beyond him. Well, it was nice talking with you Tsunade, but I should probably catch up to Gaara and the others. Tayuya's probably gotten herself into some kind of trouble already. Tsunade seemed a little loath to let Naruto leave but with a small sigh she nodded and Naruto stood up to go. He was halfway out of the door when he paused and slapped his forehead comically. Damn, I almost forgot. He suddenly vanished into thin air, shocking the Anbu present, but not as much as when he reappeared in the same instance by Tsunade's side. The Anbu were already on alert with their hands on their weapons but Naruto just bent down and picked up his Fujin no Iki kunai. Tsunade smirked, knowing he did that on purpose just to mess with her guards. Internally she sighed, knowing she would have some explaining to do to the Anbu captain when her guards gave their report. Naruto walked back out again but made sure to look straight at one of the Anbu hidden in the shadows, winking at them before he left the room. As soon as the door closed, that same Anbu, a purple-haired woman with a cat-themed mask, dropped from the roof to stand in front of Tsunade's desk. Hokage-sama, was that really the fourth? Tsunade raised a hand and motioned for the rest of the Anbu in the room to come out of hiding. Yes, that was a variation of the Hiraishin Jutsu, developed by Naruto himself. However, that information is not to leave this room, am I understood? The Anbu seemed hesitant. They desperately wanted to know how a 16-year-old kid had not only replicated one of the most powerful techniques ever created, but made his own version. Tsunade's eyes just narrowed as she looked over the assembled Anbu, noticing their hesitation. Am I understood? Her tone brokered no argument this time. Understood, Hokage-sama. Tsunade just nodded as the Anbu all returned to their positions, except for the one who had first dropped down. Hokage-sama, I could help but notice, Naruto, he looks a lot like. Tsunade raised her hand again, a dangerous look in her eyes. That's enough, Neko. The purple-haired woman's face was covered, but it was obvious that her eyes were confused. But if he is, then why is he in Suna? Shouldn't he? Tsunade slammed her hands down on the table in anger, but if you looked close enough you could see her eyes water ever so slightly. I said that's enough. Neko immediately saluted and returned to her position, but all of the Anbu in the room were now very confused about the identity of one Uzumaki Naruto. Neko especially watched the blonde-haired boy race away out the window. Naruto Uzumaki. Could it really be true, Kushina-sensei? Naruto rushed outside, using his seal to locate Tayuya. It tugged him in the direction of the gates, which he found strange. However, when he took to the rooftops he managed to catch a glimpse of some kind of crowd gathered in the streets just inside the gates. He sprinted over as fast as he could. To the civilians it looked like he simply materialized next to Gaara. Even the shinobi present were shocked at his speed. However, most quickly turned their attention back to the commotion at the gates, where a short-haired, pink-eyed girl and a large, brutish-looking man were demanding entrance into the village. Naruto quickly worked out what the problem was. Their headbands quickly showed their loyalty to Bita Awagakur. Gaara had moved towards the disturbance, curious as to what the problem was. Excuse me. The leaf shinobi harassing the Iwa Nin looked around, dismissing the red-haired boy with the gravelly voice quickly. Suddenly both of them found themselves enveloped up to the neck in a thin layer of sand, but not thin enough that they wouldn't be crushed if Gaara was so inclined. I said excuse me. Everybody in the area's eyes went wide as they took in Gaara's arrival. He hadn't even moved a muscle. Immediately he was surrounded on all sides by leaf shinobi with their kunai poised at his throat, for all the good that would do against his sand armor. Quickly one of the leaf nin that recognized who Gaara was ran forward, dropping to one knee in front of the cage. I apologize, Kazekage-sama, I assure that the ninja meant you no disrespect. All the people gathered who hadn't recognized Gaara before widened their eyes even more, some of them whispering amongst themselves. Gaara just grunted and the two ninja encased in sand dropped to the floor as their bindings retreated back to Gaara's body, the sand vanishing as if it were never there. They rubbed their necks painfully while Gaara dismissed them, turning his attention to the Iwa Nin. Suddenly they parted as a very old and very small man walked out from between them. Kazekage, so you're the brat they got to replace that bastard Kin no Subaku. Gaara stared down at the seemingly frail old man, knowing perfectly well who he was. Those that didn't began to whisper even louder, wondering who was brave enough to so blatantly disrespect a former Kage. That bastard was my father Chuchikage Dono. There was a communal gasp amongst the gathered crowd as Naruto naturally went for one of his kunai while Tayuya's hand twitched over her flute pouch. Likewise the girl behind the Chuchikage placed herself in a ready stance while the more brutish-looking man cracked his knuckles loudly. The Chuchikage and Gaara just stared at one another, not moving for a second, neither blinking for a moment. I didn't expect you to come, Chuchikage Dono. The small man stared at Gaara for a bit longer as the redhead continued to stare back impassively. The tension in the air was so thick it could have been cut by a blunt kunai. Suddenly the smaller man let out a chuckle, smiling lightly as he took in Gaara and his bodyguards. Call me Unoki. I like you, kid, you've got. Unoki's eyes suddenly twitched as Naruto's kunai managed to reflect the light, catching his attention as in a blur of motion he raced across the street, catching most unprepared for the sudden movement. He snatched the kunai out of Naruto's hand while Tayuya had already brought the flute to her lips and Naruto had already unsealed Anther, prepared for a fight. You. What are you doing with this cursed weapon? Naruto looked at the old Chuchikage curiously. He knew the Haraishin was a feared technique in Iwa, but he didn't expect anything like this. He pulled his hood down so that the old man could look at his face and all three Iwa Nin let out a simultaneous gasp, as did a few of the civilians from the Leaf Village. Namikaze. Unoki pointed at Naruto furiously, dropping the kunai he had been holding in anger. Not wanting to cause an international incident, Naruto put his hands up in an almost surrendering motion, but not quite. No. I am not Minato Namikaze. He died 16 years ago. My name is Naruto Uzumaki. Unoki continued to just stare at Naruto. He had met Minato Namikaze towards the end of the Third Shinobi War, and this boy, minus the whiskers, was his spitting image. there was no way the two weren't related, you just couldn't get that kind of similarity without blood relation. Who are you? Naruto tried to smile warmly, but with a powerful cage staring him down it proved difficult and it came out rather strained. Like I said, I'm Naruto Azu. Unoki held up a hand. Don't give me that. Who were your parents? Naruto scowled, and by this point Gaara decided to step in. I would appreciate it if you would stop harassing my shinobi Unoki Dono. The Chuchikage scowled in Gaara's direction. Your shinobi. He turned back to Naruto, you aren't a shinobi of the leaf. Naruto shook his head quickly while Onuki shot glances between him and Gaara a few times. That is correct, Naruto is a ninja of the Sand Village and his parentage is unknown. He has been an orphan since birth, at least to my knowledge. Unoki seemed to catch the last part and sent a suspicious look at Gaara. What do you mean to your knowledge? Gaara frowned, he hadn't meant to let that slip, he was trying to avoid a conflict and it appeared he was failing. Naruto was not born in Sunagakure, he was born here in Konoha, but he left at a young age and my village took him in. Unoki seemed to be back to full alert, slowly moving back to his two bodyguards who were currently sweating bullets at being surrounded by so many leaf ninja. The crowd was silent, watching the brewing conflict as the tension nearly reached a breaking point. Is this some kind of joke? Gaara shook his head while Unoki continued to send poisonous looks in Naruto's direction. You expect me to believe that this boy is not the son of Minato Namikaze when he holds a kunai of the Hiraishin Jutsu and damn near looks identical to the man. The crowd seemed to have turned their full attention to Naruto now, scrutinizing him as more and more people began to open their eyes wide as they saw the similarities. The blonde felt like he was under a spotlight as he began to fiddle with the kunai nervously, which wasn't really helping. What's going on here? All attention turned to Tsunade, who had just arrived at the scene, taking it in with one glance and gulping as she noticed Unoki staring at Naruto. Shit. Tsunade. What is the meaning of this? Who is this boy? Tsunade looked around, counting the number of Anbu operatives in the area. He is Naruto Uzumaki. Unoki shot her a murderous look as he stared right into her eyes. Who were his parents? Naruto too was now looking in Tsunade's direction, his own nervousness forgotten for the moment as he looked at her curiously. Now Chuchikage Dono, this isn't really the place to be discussing such matters, is it? Unoki's glare told her otherwise, so Tsunade pulled in a deep breath and looked around at the gathered crowd. Everybody will disperse immediately. There was a moment of hesitation as the people in the crowd looked among each other. Immediately. Quickly the civilians moved away from the woman, rushing away from the scene as the ninja followed suit. Soon it was just the Hokage, a few Anbu, the Chuchikage and his escorts, Gaara, Tayuya, and Naruto. Unoki watched them leave with distaste. In his village it only took one order to get things done. In comparison the leaf seemed weak. Tsunade. Unoki's voice was a growl now as he pointed at Naruto. Who were that boy's parents? Tsunade was trapped. On one hand she didn't want Naruto to find out this way, on the other if she refused it might start a war. Konoha and Iwa were on shaky enough terms as it was. She sighed deeply and looked at Naruto apologetically before turning back to the Chuchikage. His parents were Minato Namikaze of Konoha and Kushina Uzumaki of Uzushiogakure. Naruto's eyes went wide as he stared at Tsunade. Unoki was essentially doing the same, but he had years of practice at not showing how shocked he was. Naruto was frozen solid as his mind just shut down. His idol, the man who sealed the QB inside of him, the man whose techniques he had based his fighting style on, the greatest Hokage of the village hidden in the leaves, was his father. He saw Gaara and Tayuya look at him strangely before his world went black and he passed out. Naruto rested peacefully in the bed. For all the world it would appear his mind was untroubled and carefree. Tayuya lay next to him, a more worried look adorning her sleeping face as she curled up next to her unconscious boyfriend. Rain pattered lightly on the window as black clouds filled up the night sky, only a faint trace of moonlight filtered into the dark hotel room. The air next to their bed seemed to warp and twist for a moment, and in a few seconds a man appeared out of the thin air. He looked down at the sleeping couple, his expression hidden by his orange swirling mask as he stared intently at the blonde's face. His eyes narrowed, crinkling the slightly distorted flesh on the right side of his face. Mentally he covered up the blonde's whiskers and added a long white billowing coat to his sleeping form. His eyes narrowed even further as the corner of his mouth twisted up into a small smile. Interesting. Tayuya woke up a few seconds later, rubbing her bleary eyes as she glanced around the small room. Not seeing anything unusual, she looked back down at her sleeping boyfriend with worry, slowly stroking the whiskers adorning his cheek before settling back down next to him. His body was cold, something that, in Tayuya's world, should never happen. Naruto was always warm. It was just a constant thing. Tayuya didn't know whether to take it as an omen, but she knew it wasn't anything good. That will be it for this video. If you want more, comment down below, like, subscribe. And see you guys later.